So can you see how before you try and sit down and write your blurbs, or sometimes if you're writing a letter to an editor, before you try and write taglines, anything like this, building up a little vocabulary list can make sure you're using those key words in there. Agatha Christie was very successful, and her work has been analysed by many universities, and they're finding that there's some key words in there that people are drawn to because they know it's part of their little tribe that they like to belong to, the cozy crime writers. So finding those key words to put in there are like signals to your readers, like communicating with your reader. Okay, so some other things we need to look at. I'm going to show you another genre that I simply call, this is the first book I picked up that I bought because of a blurb. I was about 21, and it's the first time I really understood that the blurb made me want to read a book. I was on a ski holiday and there was, I was getting bored because if you've ever seen me ski, you realise I can do that for about 10 minutes. Well, 2 hours lining up to get on the thing and then 10 minutes to fall over. So I decided maybe a book could be a good idea. So I went to the bookstore, and I had at the time, I had a boyfriend who was one of those people who like to show off his knowledge and pick something that like Crime and Punishment or something like that to show off. So I was determined to find the weirdest book that I could in the bookstore to read, just to say, I don't really care about your fancy books, I want to read something fun. So this one caught my attention, Davo's Little Something, and here's the blurb. After his divorce, all easygoing Bob Davis wanted was to get on with his job as a butcher, have a few beers with his mates, and be left alone. But this is Sydney in the early 80s, the beginning of the AIDS epidemic, street gangs, gay bashings, and murders. When a gang of skinheads bashed Davo's old schoolmate to death simply because he was gay and left Davo almost dead in intensive care unit, they unleashed a crazed killer onto the streets. Before the summer was over 30 corpses had turned up in the morgue, leaving 2 bewildered detectives to wonder where they were coming from. Now, I'd always read a lot of crime stories, but this made me go, what? Like, overkill, 30 corpses? Like, it sounded like it was going to be a whole rampage story. So I was hooked. Now I want to show you the other things that you have to include in your blurb. You need to have a sense of character, setting, problem. If you're in my classroom, you know those words off by heart, because whenever I teach a writing workshop, I will repeat that all the time. We need character, setting, problem. This is what makes a story. Add twist, you get a great story. But character, setting, problem are the key things you need for a story. So let's see if it does that. Who is the character? He's easygoing Bob, he's divorced, he's a butcher. It got that information in there for me. And some words are better than others. With occupations, some occupations we can use to describe a personality almost. So if he was an accountant, we'd get a different feel. And anyone who, these books are really based on nostalgia for certain eras. They are way over the top, but they always mention suburbs and actual shops that were there, so if you lived there, you knew them. And when I was a kid, you knew what sort of person a butcher was. He had a great sense of humour, and usually a missing finger, but he had a great sense of humour. Butchers were those kind of people. So easy going Bob.
He always had knives on his belt.
Yes, they always wore their knives around. Made a few jokes about him sometimes. A friend of mine was a butcher, and he used to keep his roll of knives under the passenger seat in his car. And one time, he was also quite sceptical of young girls hitchhiking. He didn't think it was a good idea. And one day he picked up a young girl. He's like, "You shouldn't be hitchhiking. It's really not safe." Blah blah. And he had to stop suddenly, and his knives were under his seat. And she could not get out of that car. Well, you know what? She's probably not going to hitchhike. He was a character. Do we have a sense of setting? Very clear. Sydney, early 80s, beginning of the AIDS epidemic, so we know that's going to be a problem. Street gangs, gay bashings, and murders. This is the context of our story. And it's the part that, especially when I deal with children, it's the part that gets overlooked a bit. Sometimes people think of their setting as a place for the events to happen, and they like to describe it, and that's great, but the setting should also be part of the problem, part of the solution. It should be the context that this world happens in, that if it was put in a different place, it would be a different story. So your context is really important. So you want to include that. And then the last thing is our conflict or our problem. The problem is, and it was hard to narrow this down because there's a lot of problems in here. Because as I said, it's Robert G. Barrett, he wrote over the top crazy stories. A gang of skinheads had bashed his friend because his friend was gay. So obviously we've got the issue of a lot of homophobia during the early 80s. They had all those ads with Death using the bowling ball to kill people. I don't know why Death loves bowling so much, but I always think he must be kind of a fun guy when he goes bowling. But to kill people, and so people were scared. They were scared of AIDS. Everyone was going to get AIDS. So that was a problem in this story. But also, they also almost killed Davo, so he was in hospital. That was a problem. And I could have really gone on and just highlighted the whole rest of it because they unleashed a crazed killer. The only thing is I thought, well, that's not really Davo's problem because Davo is the crazed killer. So he's having fun with it. It's not really his problem. Yeah, spoiler, sorry. Okay, so what I want you to do now is we're going to go back a page to where our character is. So that's why I realised I put these in the wrong order, sorry. So now just turn back the page. And character vocabulary, what I want you to do is in your mind, get a clear idea of the type of person your character is. Unless it's something remarkable, what your character looks like is not as important unless it's something that affects the story. So clearly in a story like Wonder, that's a really important part of the story. And yet still the descriptions are left minimal there because we don't want to paint a picture of the person for the reader. We'd like them to use their own imagination. But we also want to just get them a feel for the character. So have a good think about who your character is right now. Before you actually do the drafting of the line, I would like you to come up with some vocabulary on descriptive words for your character. So as many words as you can think of that describe what your character does, who they are, their age, but also what type of person they are. Are they kind? Are they selfish? Are they angry? Are they hurt? Are they scared? Like what type of person are they? What are they going through? So think of as many vocabulary words as you can for your character, and then you're going to write an introductory line about your character, and clearly you're not going to use all those words. You're going to pick the ones that you then go, yeah, the reader wants to know that. The reader will get a feel for that. So lots of vocabulary words first, then try to just write an introductory line for your reader about your character. So your line could be something like, I'll just go back a bit. The introductory line for the character here is, after his divorce, all easygoing Bob Davis wanted was to get on with his job as a butcher, have a few beers with his mates, and be left alone. So another hint, put in the things that are important to your character in your vocab. So we know who Bob is, but in our introductory line, we also told the reader what his goal was. His goal was to pretty much do nothing. He didn't want to be part of a story, obviously. He just wanted to have the same old happen. He just wanted to, get on with his job. He was already doing that. He wanted to go and have some beers with his mates. He already did stuff like that. So Bob's goal was not to change his life and have a big dream happen. He wanted things to stay the same. The next sentence is when we will turn that. But you will write, what does your character want? Introduce who they are, give us a feel for them and what they want.